back, you guys. So it's time for the random drawing, okay? So I'm gonna pick 10 evaluation forms, and we're gonna have 10 winners, okay? So I'm gonna call the 10 names first. I want you guys to hold on, and then at the end, we're gonna hand out the prizes. Is that okay? Awesome. The first winner Brett Hall. Is Brett here? Awesome. Second winner, Andrea Concepcion. Okay. Winner number 3. I'm not sure I'm saying it correctly. Katrine Sherman from Emmaus High School. Caitlin Sherman from Emmaus High School, sorry. Next winner, Kayla Balaskak. Winner number 5. I have to consult with this one. Jose? Peralta, maybe? Is there a Jose Peralta from Millennium Art Academy? I guess there is, right? Next one, Emily Payano from Newtown or Newton High School, okay? Is it 7? Okay. Alexandra Lecture from Emmaus High School, okay. Winner number 8, Brittany Lingard from, I guess she's here. 9? Number 9, Nyrel Wade. All right. And the last winner, okay, and I want to hear spirit after the last winner, is Ebony Bolt from High School of Fashion Industries. Is she here? That's my alma mater, by the way. Thank you. So congratulations to all the winners. Kamisha will give you your $25 Target gift card, which is good for Target stores and also for Target.com, so you can redeem those, okay? So is everyone ready for a keynote? Our keynote today is a very dear friend of Cooper-Hewitt, okay? And is someone that a lot of us know, not only from talking to him today, but also from television, because we see him every Wednesday and every Thursday night on Bravo, okay? I'm talking about Tim Gunn, by the way. We're very honored to have, for the second time on this stage, Mr. Tim Gunn, who, among many other things, was the director of admissions at Parsons, the New School for Design. He was also the dean of Parsons, the chairperson of the Department of Fashion Design at Parsons. Currently, he's the creative director at Liz Claiborne. He's the co-host of Bravo's Project Runway. He's also the author of Tim Gunn's A Guide to Quality, Taste, and Style. I hope I got that right, Tim. And he's also the host of Tim Gunn's Guide to Style on Bravo, okay? So can we have an applause from Tim Gunn?
Wow. Thank you all. I'm very, very touched, and I had a wonderful time talking to many of you. I know it wasn't all of you. Thank you. I just have to tell you, I have the greatest respect for each of you. You are our future. And our whole society and culture, the future of it depends upon you and what you do. And that's why I love working with young people and why I was an educator for 29 years. But I thought I really want to personalize this and share with you some things about me that most people don't know. Because I will say about myself now that I'm the luckiest guy in the world, and I really am. I pinch myself every day and think, look at all these great things that are happening for me. But I want you to know I had a rocky road to get here. As a kid, as a very young person, I had a very insular, very solitary kind of existence. I had almost no friends, really, and but I'll tell you why. I had a terrible, in fact, very debilitating stutter, and it caused me to be extremely shy and withdrawn. And I never wanted to speak up at school. I never wanted to have to talk at all. So I was extremely quiet, shy, reserved, and I had a lot of therapy for the stutter. See, it still comes back occasionally when I'm nervous or fatigued. It comes back occasionally, but it was a big obstacle for me, and it was something that I needed to get beyond. But it also made me into a really serious, nerdy bookworm. I thought I have to excel at something at school since I'm not a social creature and I'm not part of the in crowd and not accepted really by any of the cliques. I thought, well, at least I need to get good grades. So that in some ways made me even less popular, but it was something I could do. I was a classic nerd. I did not like team sports. I really wasn't much of a sports person at all. I mean, I was always the kid who was picked last for the dodgeball team and the softball team, which, you know, is damaging to your ego. Maybe it's why I don't have one these days. And I was so unsocial. Well, I won't say that I was unsocial. I wasn't unsocialized. I was antisocial. Unsocialized implies that I was living in a cave, which was not the case. But my parents sent me off to a boarding school thinking this will force me into a social situation that will help me excel, and in fact, it did the opposite. I guess it's a very long-winded, and it could be a lot longer, way of saying that I wasn't one of those people who fit in, and I was extremely unhappy as a child and as an adolescent. And it wasn't a pretty sight. I mean, I certainly wasn't. And I went off to college studying English literature, having spent years wanting to be an architect, and I had a taste of architecture school, and at that time, absolutely hated it. I thought it was one of the most horrible, mundane experiences I'd ever had. I was doing plumbing and electrical specs, and I thought, oh my God, I don't want to spend my life doing this. And I had been a very serious classical pianist. Not that I was any good, but I was serious about it. But then I thought, you know, I think I really want to be a writer. So all the things that I was doing were leading to creative disciplines. So I studied English for 4 years and hated every second of it. And in my last year in college, I was finally allowed to take an art course. The art courses were only permitted, were only open to students who had art or architecture as majors, and I did not. So I was finally permitted to take an art course, and I met this incredible, incredible woman by the name of Ann Truitt, who was teaching a drawing course. And she was there at the school I was attending for a year. And then she was going back to her home, Washington, which was coincidentally my home. And she was teaching at a small museum school there called the Corcoran. So I graduated with my English degree. I went home and declared to my parents that I really wanted to take a summer course in drawing, having had this staggering experience. And when I say it was a great experience, let me describe it to you. For the first time in my academic career, the answer wasn't in the back of the book. It wasn't some sphinx with a riddle that I had to solve. that answer was in me. And it was a matter of pulling it out, of cultivating it, of nurturing it, which Ann Truitt was very successful doing with me. And it was an unshackling, it was a kind of liberation of my whole soul. I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but it was dramatic for me. And it was the first academic-like experience that I'd had where I felt that I was in control of it. I wasn't being infantilized by it. I was controlling it. I was running it, and it was only as good or as bad as I made it. It wasn't going to be a situation where there was a bell curve and somebody was going to fail no matter what. I could ascend. I could succeed in a way that I'd never experienced, and it caused me to study fine arts for the next 3 years and get another undergraduate degree in fine arts. And in the course of that study, and I thought I would be a painter, I was forced to take a three-dimensional design class, and I moaned and I groaned about, oh, I don't want to do this. And it opened up another door for me. And I ended up becoming a sculptor, and I was very serious about it. And keep in mind, this little shy, quiet, very awkward and reserved kid suddenly was coming into his own. And at this point, I'm 20, 21, and I'm just beginning to feel like I'm a real citizen of the world now, and I'm a participant in it. So it was a big, big moment for me. And I had some very good critical success with my sculpture, and a couple of important people bought it, and that was nice. But then, oh, and I should explain, I was not making a living doing this. I was making a living making architectural models for 4 different architecture firms in Washington. And then my alma mater called me and said, we'd like you to teach a summer course in three-dimensional design. And I thought, oh, great, I'd love to do this. And then I was confronted with 16 students, and I was so terrified that I had to back up against the back wall of the classroom because my knees were shaking so badly I thought I was going to topple over. I was a wreck. I would throw up in the parking lot every morning, and I thought this is either going to kill me or cure me. Oh, and the stuttering was worse. I was a mess. And it ended up curing me. I mean, it took a while, but I ended up loving teaching. I went from, well, I was teaching, and I was the assistant to the chair of the fine arts department, and still working on my sculpture. And then the director of admissions at the school went on maternity leave. It's not as though people didn't know she was going to go, but there were no plans made to replace her. So I was asked if I would fill in while she was gone. And I had no idea what admissions work was like other than having been an applicant. But I said, well, yeah, I mean, I'm willing to learn. And that ended up becoming a big part of my professional career, and it led to my meeting the people at Parsons, where I ended up working for 24 years. And there's travel involved in admissions, and I know there are admissions people here. There are portfolio days, and we would travel as a group and get to know each other. And the Parsons people were responding to my whole manner of presentation and how I interact with students, and they liked it. And they called me and they offered me a job. And I said, no, thank you. I'm very happy where I am. I'm married to Washington in my own way, and I have a successful career here, and I'm not interested in moving to New York. And in the course of the following 12 months, a lot happened to me. It happened to me professionally, happened to me personally, and when I say professionally, I mean in different dimensions. And Parsons called again, and they said, do you want to come and interview with us? And I said, I'll be right up. And 2 weeks later, I was living in New York. And having always romanticized what the experience of being in New York would be like, because when you visit New York, it is very romantic, but when you live here, it's very different. And suddenly, the nice hotel room that I would stay in was translated to a one-room apartment with the only sink being in the kitchen. There was no sink in the bathroom. And I still remember my mother coming to visit me for the first time in this little apartment, and she was doubled over in the kitchen, holding herself up by the refrigerator and the stove, sobbing, "I didn't raise you to live like this." Well, I thought, from what I had seen, it was a pretty nice apartment. And I grew up at Parsons in admissions. I was also teaching a couple of courses, and I became director, and then soon after I was made associate dean, and in that capacity worked with all of the academic programs at the school. There were 13 of them. And I also did a lot of travel for Parsons in that I was setting up academic programs or helping set up academic programs abroad. We have affiliate campuses. So I did a lot of work with curriculum development and faculty hiring and department chair hiring. And I'm portraying all this to you just to talk about the serendipitous path of my life and how you never know what may happen. I mean, little did I know that I would be traveling to Asia once a month, every month for 8 years. And for the first 5 years, it was pretty exciting and glamorous. And for the last 3 years, my bile would rise every time the plane door would close. I'd think, oh God, get me out of here. But it was exciting work to do. But in a manner of speaking, I was a Mr. Fix-It around Parsons. I took things that were broken, weren't working, and I helped make them work. Though I'm calling myself a Mr. Fix-It, I really called myself the pooper scooper. And there was a lot of pooping going on, let me tell you. And in the year 1999, we had a kind of crisis in our fashion design program. And it was of multiple proportions, but at the core of it was a major issue. The issue being that the fashion curriculum had not changed in 50 years. And any of you who know the fashion industry or any design industry, architecture, product design, graphic design, whatever it is, it's all about change. It's because these fields are barometric gauges of what's happening in our society and in our culture, what's happening economically, what's happening politically. They have to change. So to have a curriculum that was unchanged for all these years was just profoundly preposterous. And I wasn't an insider. I wasn't coming from the fashion program. I was coming from outside of it. So I was able to bring, I'd like to say a lot of good critical analysis to it, but that really wasn't the case because I was dumb and uninitiated. What I could really bring to it was, what are you talking about? And why do we do it that way? And what is this? And the refrain was always, that's the way we've always done it. Well, that was not good enough for me. And if anything, I saw students who were under-challenged. They were so much more capable of achieving what they needed to achieve to be ready for this industry than what they were being presented with. So I was, in my pooper scooper capacity, was given the assignment of going into the fashion program, diagnosing the issues, and offering up a prescription for solving them. And ostensibly that was going to be for a year, but it ended up being for more than 7. And as proud as I am about Project Runway and my book and various other things, I know professionally I'm proudest of the repositioning of the fashion program because and I'll add, I don't know that I have the courage to do it again today. At the time, I was unencumbered by, many things. And my desire was only to offer the very best to the students and to prepare them best for a very difficult, demanding, and daunting industry. And when I arrived in the fashion program, I'm going to be blunt, it was not a design program, it was a dressmaking school. And that concerned me because to prepare anyone for this industry, it can't be the vocational aspect only. It has to be about conceptual development and about context. That has to be at the core of it. And fashion history is critically important to this design discipline as is the history of a discipline to every design field. And additionally, this program had no technology, no modern technology, no computer technology, with the department saying, this industry doesn't care about it. Well, if it doesn't, it's going to. And it is true that the fashion industry was the last to wake up to computer technology, but it's fully embraced it since. And I will add that as difficult and daunting as this all was for me, there was the industry, Seventh Avenue, was on my case as well, saying, don't change that school. That school educated Mark Jacobs and Donna Karen and Tom Ford and Badgley Mishka and Anna Sui, and the list goes on and on. How could you dare change it? And I said, but as far as I was concerned, and let me also explain, that program that remained unchanged for 50 years, I think it was perfectly relevant until we got up to the mid to late 80s. Then I think it became an anachronism, a dinosaur. For many years, it was fine because the industry was, in a way, while design changed, the structure of the industry was very much about you go to design school, you become an assistant designer for another designer. And as we were heading into this new century, this new millennium, this industry was changing dramatically. It was much more about supporting young entrepreneurial designers, people thinking innovatively and creatively. And Parsons was not prepared to do that, not in the remotest way. So we had to reposition things so that we could nurture and cultivate that. And I'm proud to say that the first graduating class of the new curriculum included the Proenza Schooler boys, that phenomenon. It's hard to believe that was only 2002. So it was a test that it was working, and the industry came back to me and said, you know, we were naysayers, we said you couldn't do it, but we're glad you did. And never look back, never do anything differently. And in the fall of, or rather in the January of 2004, the Project Runway producers called me. And they said, we're talking to dozens and dozens of people in the industry, and we'd like to come and talk to you. And I asked, about what? And they told me, and I said, this industry is in enough trouble without a fashion reality show. And I meant it. But then I Googled them, and thank God for Google. So I Googled their names, and I found out that they were the Project Greenlight producers, so I knew that they had a lot of integrity and seriousness of purpose, and they came in to meet with me, and I loved them. I mean, I was really captivated by them and what they had to say about the show, and when they said they wanted to work with real fashion designers, I was instantly placated. But there was one moment in our meeting that I knew was particularly potent, and it was when they asked me the question, how would I respond if they were to say that they want the designers to create a wedding dress in 2 days? And I shrugged. I was just very matter of fact. I said, they'll have to design a wedding dress in 2 days. So then they asked me, you mean it can be done? And I said, sure. And they said, well, no one else in the industry agrees. They say it will take a week, it'll take 2 weeks, it'll take a month. I said, well, if you want an Oscar de la Renta gown, it will take a week or a month. In 2 days, you're going to get a basic column with no sleeves, but it can be done. It's make it work. It's what it's all about. So I knew that at least we were thinking the same way. And they called later that week and they said, we'd love to work with you. And I have to tell you, at that time, my role on the show didn't exist. It was in no one's vocabulary. And it wasn't until after I went on the auditions with the producers that they said, we think we need someone to be to work with the designers in the workroom as a kind of mentor, and would I be interested? And I asked, do I have to live with them? And when I heard the answer was no, I said, well, I would certainly be interested. But it was a big process of getting B-roll together and Bravo weighing in. And at the same time, I have to tell you, the entire time we taped season 1, I never dreamed I would actually be on the show. I thought as I was doing my work, I know why the producers created this role, because they were afraid that by sending the designers into the workroom with a challenge, they wouldn't talk. They would just do their work, and then it would appear on the runway and be judged, but there would be no dialogue. So by sending me in to ask, what are you doing, and how are you doing it, and why, at least there would be a response. And I thought, okay, for television purposes, all you need is the designer's voice responding to my question, but you don't have to hear my question, and you certainly don't have to see me. So when the premiere happened, the premiere party, I didn't go. And I didn't go for 2 reasons. One, if I really wasn't on the show, how humiliated was I going to feel? And 2, if I was on the show, what was I going to look and sound like? So I watched the first episode the way I used to watch The Wizard of Oz as a kid, from under the covers of my bed, peeking out. So I thought I can have the sheets drop over my eyes anytime I need to. And I have to tell you how the industry responded too, because But something you may not know about us. When the show began to air, no one was watching it. And I mean no one. I mean, my mother and my sister were. I think that was about it. We had terrible ratings. And I was with the producers going to do the home visits to Jay McCarroll and Wendy Pepper and Carasson that first season. And the producer received a phone call from Bravo basically saying that they didn't think the show was going to run the full cycle of the season. That's how bad the ratings were. And we were driving in a snowstorm. So I said to Jane Lipsitz, the chief executive producer, then let's turn around and go back to New York. Why are we risking life and limb if this is never going to air on television? Let's go back. We didn't, of course. And Bravo made the strategic decision of rerunning the show over and over and over again from the beginning of the Christmas holidays through the middle of January. And when episode 4 premiered in the middle of January, suddenly the ratings were up 400%, and they just continued to climb. So we were kind of like the little engine that could. And that alone was a phenomenon. But the fashion industry was responding in kind of snarky ways. I mean, it was a mixed bag of responses. Some people loving it, other people thinking it was the end of fashion and that we doomed it. But you know what a lot of that was? Project Runway ripped the veil right off of fashion because there was a lot of effort to portray it as glamorous and sexy and seductive. It's not. It's dirty, it's gritty, it's daunting, it's difficult, and unless you love it, don't do it. And that's exactly what Project Runway was saying. And the industry really got its back up about that. So I was dealing with the barbs that were being thrown at me about that. And there were not many, but they were coming from some powerful people. Though I will tell you this one anecdote. We were desperately trying to get fashion designers to guest judge on season 1, but no one knew who we were or what we were. I mean, they knew who I was, but they didn't know what the show was. So I was calling Diane von Furstenberg because she's a dear friend. And Diane, please do this, please. No, I am on my island. I do not want to be bothered. I don't know what the show is. So then the show airs. Diane's on the phone right away. Why didn't you tell me about this show? I would have been a judge. You didn't tell me anything about it. Oh, yes, I did. So we know she's been on almost every season since. So on the topic of the snarkiness, we were taping season 2. I couldn't believe we had a season 2. That alone was a phenomenon. And it was Bastille Day. It was July 14th. And we had just wrapped production. It was over. And the Emmys were announced. And season 1 had been nominated for an Emmy. And it was the only non-network show nominated. And I went running through the halls of Parsons because that's where we were taping and where the producers were shouting, we won an Emmy. And then when I was out on the sidewalk walking home that evening, I had one other snarky comment hurled at me about Project Runway. And I turned to the person, I said, we have been nominated for an Emmy. And I walked away. And this year we won a Peabody Award. I don't know whether you know what the Peabodys are, but they're for excellence in documentary and news. And so there we were with strife and consternation all over the world and war and disease. And then there's happy, peppy little us. So it was a huge, huge honor. And a show of our type has never been recognized by the Peabody Committee. So it was a staggering achievement. I am babbling like a lunatic. So I'm going to invite Madeline back up, and we're going to do a little Q&A. And then we're going to ask questions, or have you all ask questions. All right? Anyway, I repeat, you are the future. I have spent my life investing in young people because I believe in you and what you can do, and I've already seen almost 2 generations of the results of that. And I just wanted you to know there's not a formula or a prescription for getting where you end up. I wouldn't even say where you want to go. Keep your radar up, keep your antenna up to opportunities, create opportunities when you feel that it's appropriate to do so, and just let life happen to you and with you, okay? All right, thank you. Oh, Madeline, you're gonna sit over here.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
So-
I did babble.
No, you didn't. It's fine. So we have a few questions for you. I'm going to
Okay.
start the questions, and then you guys will pick up. I hope you guys start thinking now about the questions you want to ask Tim Gunn, okay? So one of the questions I have for you, Tim, is as director of admissions of Parsons for so many years, 20 years, you said?
Oh, no, I was only director of admissions for 3.
Oh, but you were there 20 years.
I was
or
there
so.
24 years.
24
Yeah.
years. But as director of admissions, and you talk to a lot of admissions people today, you guys, but I was wondering what your thoughts are as far as advice on portfolio preparation and college essays and that kind of stuff to help the kids, the teens, prepare, for their college applications.
Well, there's one disadvantage that I have in that I haven't done admissions for almost 20 years. So I don't know what role computer technology plays in the process right now. I don't know whether everything's being emailed in terms of portfolio, in terms of visuals. But I would hope that the content aspect hasn't changed. And for me, what was always most important was knowing who you are. Who you are as individuals, what makes you unique, because I believe everyone is unique. How do you articulate that? What are your goals and desires? And how have you taken the opportunities that have been presented to you and worked with those opportunities to your best advantage? And I'll give you an example of what I mean. I would go to college fairs and to career days in high schools, and at the high schools in particular, invariably an art teacher would come up to me in front of a group of students and put out 2 portfolios and say, tell me which one is better. And my response was always the same, and it was always disarming to the teacher and to the students. I can't possibly tell you that unless you tell me who the students are and how many courses they've had. I mean, generally, what's their whole background? Because that's my way of assessing how well you've embraced the opportunities that are presented to you. Parsons has an admissions committee, so we have a group of professionals, of experts in this area who are looking at the visual components and the academic components of the applicants rather. And I remember having this big debate with my colleagues over very stunning portfolio from a magnet school in Texas, Magnet School for the Arts, and a rather naive, technically, but powerful conceptually, portfolio from someone who was homeschooled in Alaska, and it was not Sarah Palin. And I just remember, and there are very limited spaces at Parsons, so we get into these debates. We don't just say, oh, we can take both of them. And I was all for this young man from Alaska because he had so little available to him. And this is before the internet. This isn't a case where, oh, you can learn art history online. So little available to him, and had so fully utilized to about 1,000% what his resources were. Versus the student at the Magnet High School in Houston, who, there's a wonderful museum there, this is a great school, tons of resources, and it was a perfectly fine portfolio. But if we had a choice in terms of who is demonstrating the ability to really embrace everything and gobble it all up and have powerful work, I was with what was, in fact, a weaker portfolio, but I felt a stronger aptitude. Sorry, very long response.
We also have younger students, so perhaps freshmen, first years, and sophomores here. What do you think they should be doing, now that they have some time before they prepare for this application?
Well, I just have to say, even if you're not interested in the art and design aspect of college education, the study of art and design, to me, it's what I said earlier about my own experiences. It's so enriching. It helps your eye. It helps you build critical awareness. Believe me, if you have to draw an apple for an hour, you know every single millimeter of that apple and you see it in an entirely new and enhanced kind of way. I think it's an incredible experience. I feel the same way about the study of art history. I mean, it's our visual culture, it's our material culture, really, or art and design history, and it's our whole, I mean, when we tell the story of our society and culture, how do we tell it? Or at least how have we told it? Through the environments in which people lived and the clothes that they wore. So anyone who even attempts to trivialize these fields, or more particularly fashion, what a bunch of baloney. So I just want to encourage you to embrace all of the opportunities that you have available to you. And for those of you in New York City, there are great summer programs or weekend programs in art and design, and experiment. I mean, it goes back to my 3D design experiences. I balked with my advisor about having to take that course. I said, I'm not interested in that. Little did I know it would open up this huge and incredibly meaningful, life-changing door for me. So sometimes those things that we resist the most are the things that end up being the most powerful and important to us. So be a sponge.
You were talking about how difficult it is to be a designer.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult.
I was hoping that you will talk a little bit about what competition is like. So once the teens go to Parsons or go to any design school and are confronted with the real life of the fashion industry or the design industry
or any of the design
general.
industries. I mean, thankfully, with a field like architecture, you have to have a degree in order to practice. But a field like fashion, you can put together a portfolio and pound the pavements with it and land a job and grow up in one of the larger houses and have a very nice career. But if you really, really want to be a fashion designer who is a brand, you need education. You really do. I have learned so much through the whole audition process of Project Runway. And as the show has matured, my point of view about who will be successful has matured as well. I really believe that people who are self-taught in design, and now fashion specifically, are at a terrible disadvantage. They end up being home sewers, basically. So seamstresses, tailors, they don't really understand design. And it can't just be a pretty dress. And people would get so mad at me at the auditions, people auditioning, because I would say, very matter-of-factly, not meant to be unkind, but just directly, I see a beautifully made dress. I don't see fashion. And without the fashion component, it's just a dress. I also say all the time, we need clothes, we don't need fashion. We want fashion, we have a fervor for it and an excitement for it, but we need clothes. And there's a difference between being a good clothing designer, and I have the greatest respect for good clothing designers, and being a fashion designer. And to really understand what that's like, you need a good education. And it goes back to what I was saying about context, about its being societal, cultural, historic, economic, and political. You need all those liberal arts as well. They're really important to your development. And you need to know what books people are reading, what websites they're visiting, what DVDs they're watching, what CDs they're listening to. CD's probably an antiquated term now. Anyway, you know what I mean. What's on their iPhone. And it's because you're that barometric gauge. So if you're doing this on your own and you're kind of living in a metaphorical cave, like Kenley Collins, it's going to be difficult for you. It's going to be very, very difficult.
Should we take some questions from
Sure.
the audience? The first victim, who wants to ask Tim Gunn a question?
Oh, but not a victim, the first hero.
Raise your hand if you want to. Raise your hands, and we have roaming mics around, so we'll get to you. And I will ask you to please speak loudly and clearly so that we can hear you, because with the phones, you know, it's a little complicated
Why don't you
sometimes.
stand up? Our question asker. No?
Don't be shy.
We have.
And also, tell us what high school you're from and your name.
Oh, I'm Lena. I go to School of the Future. And I was wondering just how you think fashion and designs actually impact our society and how we are, I guess, as functioning citizens?
Well, I believe in the semiotics of clothes. That means that the clothes we wear send a message about how we want to be perceived, how we want the world to receive us. Which is why I believe people need to accept responsibility for how they dress, how they present themselves to the world. And what stronger gauge do we have of our society and our culture than that? I mean, when someone walks into a room, the first thing I notice is their gender. The second thing I notice is what they're wearing. And I make certain assumptions about them based on that. Those assumptions could be completely wrong, but it has to do with the semiotics, that these clothes do send a message. And there are so many people I say this to who have a very bad response. It's like, that's terrible, that's so shallow. Yeah, but it's true, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't you all agree with that statement? That a new classmate walks in first day of school, you make certain assumptions about them. You learn more about them as you move forward, but it's a very strong messaging system. And the fact that American fashion has evolved to a point where it's incredibly diverse versus where it was in the middle of the 1980s and earlier, when it was a very narrowly defined swath. Now, and especially in this city, we have the freedom to be whoever we want to be. And there really are no limits put on that. And I think that's fantastic. And I trust it will never change because we won't ever want to be narrowly defined again. Does that help?
And just to comment, Tim,
Yes.
on what you said, I think it's important for them to realize, you guys, that when you go on a college interview, the first impression, what you're wearing, is a reflection of who you are. And if you're not, if you're dressed in a certain way, it sends a message to the person interviewing you, not just for, college admission, but also for a job.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying any of you should change. I'm merely saying that you need to, as I said a moment ago, accept responsibility for how you present yourself to the world. And I won't buy it when I hear people say, well, I don't care about how I dress. Well, you need to. You need to care. And that doesn't mean you can't wear jeans and a t-shirt. Of course you can. I do all the time. And the easiest way to dress that up is just put on a jacket.
Okay, we have another question.
Any other questions? Please stand so we can see you, so Tim can see your face.
I wouldn't stand up because I couldn't stand up.
I go to Emmaus High School, and you said there was a difference between fashion designers and clothing designers.
Yes.
Everybody designs clothing, like even in fashion. What's the difference between like the boots she's wearing or the suit you're wearing?
Clothes don't change. They don't need to change. It's a matter of both protection of sorts from the elements and modesty. I'm going to quote a dear friend, Grace Mirabella, the former editor-in-chief of Vogue, who says, a t-shirt is a t-shirt is a t-shirt. But fashion changes by definition because a fashion designer versus a clothing designer taps into the culture and what's happening. And when a fashion designer is really and seriously morphing all of that, they're even able to look ahead and almost predict. It's almost like having a fashion crystal ball. And the American designer who I believe does that better than anyone, and it's a controversial person to mention, is Marc Jacobs. I think he's the closest we come to someone who really is able to look into the future in that very profound way. There are items that, I'm wearing a suit that is reflective of this particular time based on the width of the lapel, based on the cut of it. It's a little slimmer than suits have been in the past few years. It could be a lot slimmer still if that were my style. It's not. So it certainly comes out of this time, but I'm also, talk about semiology. I'm a conservative guy. I want to have a certain polish and a certain sophistication, but I don't want to be making any loud fashion statements. And I don't want to appear underdressed, especially when I'm in front of all of you. And it's a respect issue. But are these just clothes? I have suits in my closet that I think are just clothes. I don't know that this is. Is it high fashion? No. But I'm not a high fashion person. So when I say fashion, I'm really not talking about the Paris couture runways. Those are floats in a parade. Those are moon clothes. Those clothes do not navigate the real world. But I'm talking about designer ready-to-wear. That does change every season. Does that help? Good.
Next question.
Hi. What do
Hi.
you, hi. What do you consider an important attribute for a fashion designer to bring to this industry?
Vision. For a fashion designer, it really has to be about vision, a point of view, something to say. And that goes back to what we began with, which is know who you are and know what it is that you want to say. I'm going to add something else about fashion designers. Whenever my students, and I had the best and the brightest, I love my students, but they could get stuck creatively. And I'd always ask them, who is the customer? Who is the customer? And invariably they were stuck. They'd say, I don't know. That was the problem. I mean, there's a big difference between art and design, and let me describe it to you. And I know firsthand from spending many years as an artist. As an artist, I set the challenge that I solve. It comes from me. I only have myself to please. I only have myself to worry about. I have no real time constraints. I set the challenge that I solve. As a designer, I have a challenge that's outside of me. It's a client, it's a customer who has needs that I have to satisfy. So I can't just design anything. It has to really work for that particular profile of individual. So it's really very different. Furthermore, designers, all designers, have tremendous time constraints. I could work on a piece of sculpture for a year. I can't work on a fashion collection for a year. I mean, it won't work. And this day and age, you're not working on one collection at a time. You're generally working with about 3. And you're shuffling them around like cards on a card table. So it's really important to make that distinction.
Any other questions?
Hi.
Hi. What would you recommend if you wanted to learn about jewelry and stuff like that?
I'm sorry, what would I recommend if?
You wanted to learn about jewelry?
About jewelry?
Yeah.
There are lots of good jewelry programs in this country. And I would find schools that have good programs and follow up with them, get their catalogs, look at them online. Yeah, there are very few good accessory designers in this country. We need more. So if you're interested in that, pursue it.
And then you can be a designer here.
Yeah.
For the Teen Design Fair, you can come and be one of
Exactly.
the designers.
Other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Rebecca,
Hi.
and I was wondering, with all the competition amongst your peers, how can you stay positive?
How do you keep the competition positive?
No, I'm saying with all the competition with your peers and everything, with designing fashion and everything, how do you stay positive?
How do I stay positive?
Yeah. Or in general.
Oh, I don't know. I'm a positive thinking individual. I mean, I really believe in the qualities of people, and for me, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and I navigate the world that way. I have to. I mean, there's some people I know who bring a rain cloud around with them, so it's always raining on them. And I just don't believe in operating that way. And for me, I'm constantly invigorated and excited and inspired by the kinds of things that you all do, by what you produce. I mean, the Project Runway designers inspire me and excite me. My students always did. I mean, as the chair of the fashion department at Parsons, I was a big, heavy-duty administrator, but I also taught, but I only taught 1 day a week. And whenever I would get this bureaucracy, this paperwork. I'd walk into one of the studios and I'd be picked up right away by the excitement of the creative process. So now I'm a very positive person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to get Project Runway on TV?
Well, Bravo was already committed to Project Runway before we even taped it. So we knew we had a home. We just didn't know how long our lifespan would be. So it's hard to believe that we just wrapped season 6 on Saturday. I can't believe I can say that. Season 6? Really? Because it still seems like season 1 just happened. Was that your question? Though, yeah. No, we already had a home before we taped it. Television is too expensive to do it speculatively. You really need to have it hammered.
Okay. Hi, my name is Bruno. I go to Long Island City High School in Queens.
Hi.
Hi. My question is, what do you think are the main obstacles for a fashion designer or any kind of designer? And how do you think you could overcome these obstacles?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that just a little more slowly?
What do you think are the main obstacles for?
Oh, obstacles.
Yeah, for a designer, and how do you think you could overcome them?
Well, there are tons of obstacles, let me tell you. You have to have an excellent and truly deliverable business plan before you even can begin to launch a fashion line. I mean, I think about my students. I mean, fortunately, I believe that they're more knowledgeable now, but when I first arrived in the fashion program, they would say things like, well, I'll show a collection at not at Bryant Park, they couldn't afford that. I'll show a collection during Fashion Week, and then I'll see what the buyers think. Then you'll see what the buyers think. Well, if the buyers love it and they come to you and they want to buy, are you prepared to go into production? Do you have the textile resources to back this up? Do you have wholesale prices? Do you have a import-export agent? Do you have all these things in place? And of course, they would look at me like I had 3 heads and they'd be glazed over. So there are so many moving parts in this. You need to approach it from a long-term perspective, because back in the 80s, and I'm thinking about Marc Jacobs specifically, he had 3 startups that failed. And in the 80s, you could do that. And the industry was forgiving. Today, the industry is not even remotely forgiving. They will move on to another designer, and they will not forget. They're like elephants. They will not forget that you did this. So you've got to really be able to deliver on time, and you have to be thinking long term. So it requires substantial backing. I mean, I'm also saying this depends upon what kind of scale you want. There are plenty of fashion designers who have a very nice existence doing one-of-a-kind pieces that they sell in boutiques. That is a difficult life, but so is Michael Kors' life. His life is not easy. So no matter what flavor of design it is, it's daunting. And as eager as this industry is to embrace young entrepreneurial thinking designers, it's just as eager to topple you over, because the competition is so stiff. And when you see the fashion designers sort of kissy, huggy at these events, they hate each other. They hate each other because they look at each other and think, that client of yours could be mine. So it's a very tough, cutthroat kind of place. There's a veil of politeness, and unless you love this industry or any design industry that you're in, any of the disciplines, unless you love it, there are too many obstacles for you to sustain your career in it. You'll simply depart for something else. So you've got to love it.
We have time for one more question, you guys. Unfortunately, we can't keep Tim forever.
No, yes you can.
You're getting us in trouble, Tim.
I don't want to keep everybody else forever.
All right.
Hi.
Thank you. Last question. Huzzah. You said before that when you started art, it was as if the answers were inside of you. Well, say one had a similar impulse, but kept feeling like this wasn't the reality, feeling that one could never achieve such things. Do you think that so much self-doubt is a sign that one is not supposed to pursue this dream?
Absolutely not. No. Do I think did you hear the question? Do I think that self-doubt means that you shouldn't pursue a dream that you may have? No. As a matter of fact, I think self-doubt gives you a critical analytical edge. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to be completely self-effacing and beat yourself up all the time, but I think it's good to always have a little bit of that sense of, is this good enough? Am I really meant for this? It keeps you, I think, agile. It keeps you, as I said, critically analytical. But I think too much of it is definitely a bad thing. But does it mean you shouldn't be in the industry? Never. No, no, no.
Thank you.
So we're out of time. Tim, sorry.
No,
You can come next year.
I just want to thank all of you, and thank you for your very thoughtful questions.
Thank you, guys.
I love being here with you.
And I want to thank you all for coming, you guys. I hope you guys come back next year. I also hope that you sign up to do design directions. The registration form is in your backpacks. And I want to thank Tim Gunn again and all the designers here and all the design schools. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And
Have a good night.
Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.